Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. How's everybody doing? Good. My name is Abel Guillen, and I'm currently a trustee for the Peralta Community College Board. I just wanted to acknowledge Councilmember Desley Brooks, who's here as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge you for being here. Thank you for coming. And much like Hal Jin, actually, I'm the first Latino ever to get elected to the Peralta Community College District, and the youngest. I think it's a sad testament that Asian Americans and Latinos and other folks are still breaking barriers, but that's where we are today. I'm very happy and very proud to be here in front of you. My parents are hardworking union folks. My dad works at the Hilton Hotel. He's been there for 39 years, and he's very proud of the job that he's done there in the hospitality business. My mom is a cook. My mom is a cook at a hospital. She's been there for over 30 years. And these are good jobs that were union jobs, and they allowed my family to be able to raise me and my brothers so that I could become the first in my family to graduate from college. Unfortunately, today, that opportunity of California being golden is being diminished. And no longer can people afford to go to school. No longer can people access health care. I've been on the Peralta Community College Board the last 6 years. And unfortunately, while we've been able to provide good education to a lot of students, the state has reneged on its promise. So I'm running for the state assembly to make sure that other next generations has the opportunities that I've had, and to make sure that here in California, everyone has health care, and that we have a prosperous environment for our small businesses, for our community. So there's going to be a lot of questions and answers during the period, so I would like to just, again, thank you for being here, and again, my name is Abel Guillen.
Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Very honored to be here with these great candidates on the stage. Very honored to have the opportunity to introduce Joel Young to you. As the moderator announced, he's on his way. He'll be here shortly. Joel Young is currently the AC Transit Director at Large, representing 13 cities in Alameda and Contra Costa County. He has strong roots here in this community. He was born in San Francisco. He went to schools here, went to Cal for undergrad and Cal Berkeley Law. Joel has been working his whole life to try and create opportunity for the residents of this district. He's running on a campaign now, and he has a very simple message, and his message is jobs here. To do anything with government, we need more revenue for the state. To generate more revenue for the state, we need to grow our economy, get our economy back on track, create jobs here in the community. Joel has a strong record of action creating jobs at the AC Transit Board. He passed a Buy American resolution in 2009 that steered agency dollars to local businesses. Just a few weeks ago, the agency signed a bus contract to purchase 60 buses from a company called Gillig that's in Hayward. It's going to help preserve hundreds of jobs, middle-class jobs. That's exactly what Joel wants to do up in the state legislature. California spends billions of dollars every year purchasing materials, buying services. And when California spends that money, it should be investing in firms, investing in companies that are creating jobs here in our communities. So that's Joel's #1 priority in the state. He's created a very concrete plan to do that. I'd invite all of you to go to our website. It's www.youngforassembly.com to read that plan. And if you have any questions about it, please feel free to contact us or to ask Joel about it later in this session. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here. Joel will be here very shortly, and hopefully I can represent him in his absence. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you. Good evening. How's everybody doing tonight? Good. Thank you all for coming on this rainy evening. My name is Rob Bonta. I'm the Vice Mayor of the City of Alameda. I just want to thank APAPA for putting on this event that will help really inform our community about this important race. So thank you for taking the lead on that. My parents were leaders in the United Farm Worker Movement. They were community organizers, farm worker organizers. We lived in La Paz when I was a child, and I grew up learning from them the importance of economic justice and social justice and racial justice. And my parents fought side by side with great leaders like Philip Vera Cruz and Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez. And they went on in their careers to continue to serve the public and make a commitment to public service, and they passed that value on to me. And I have fought hard here in the East Bay to fight for better schools and safer streets and more prosperous communities. And that's what I want to fight for in Sacramento as well. As Councilmember Kernahan mentioned, the decisions that are made in Sacramento are absolutely critical to the health of our local communities. And I'm a product of California's public schools. I was able to fulfill my own personal dream of going to the best colleges and universities in the world because of the quality of those schools. My wife and I have 3 children, school-age children. My wife and I met 23 years ago, and with our 3 school-age children, we now worry deeply that they may not be able to fulfill the same dream that I had. And we are threatening in this generation to be one of the first times where the next generation's quality of life is not as good as the one prior. And we owe it always to the next generation to provide a better quality of life. For public safety, I have made decisions that ensure that there were no street-level service cuts to police and fire protection services, to fire suppression, to emergency medical response. And in jobs, we've created jobs, retained existing jobs, created more jobs in the East Bay, and that's absolutely critical to a healthy California. I finally just want to say something that I will say to my next session.
Mr. Guillen, please cite 3 compelling issues facing the state of California, and what solutions do you have for addressing them?
Thank you very much for the question. There are lots of issues facing California. Amongst them, first of all, is the structural budget deficits that we have, number 1. Number 2 is the 2/3 vote requirement to pass any revenue measures. And number 3, investment in our economic development and education. Those are the 3 main problems that I will attempt to solve. Is this thing on? Yes. Attempt to solve it, but I will solve in Sacramento. In terms of the 2/3 budget revenue, I think we need to make sure that we here in California elect a democratically controlled state legislature that's 2/3 in both houses, so that we can actually look at investments in our infrastructure. That's priority number 1. Nothing else works if we are held hostage by a small group of people up in Sacramento. Number 2 is, I talked about, 30 seconds. Okay. Number 2, I talked about the divestment education. California now ranks number 47th out of 50 states in divestment. California used to be top 10, and that's wrong. I want to make sure that we bring up California back to number in the top 10 in terms of funding for education. And number 3, we need to figure out how to make government work so it doesn't get in the place of entrepreneurs who actually want to start businesses, and make it a lot easier to rebuild our economic engine here in California. So I see my time. That's a lot of questions for 1 minute.
1 minute, 30 seconds. Okay. I'd like to welcome Mr. Young. Joe Young just joined us. Welcome. And we just started the questioning, so this is the first question, so you're in good timing. So the first question, are you ready for this, or you want to take a second to rest a little bit?
Depends on the question.
Okay, depends on the question. Okay, that's very good. Here's the question. Please cite 3 compelling issues facing the state of California, and what solutions do you have for addressing these?
Just 3? Is this thing on?
3 for now.
And I'll know you want us 3, because there are a lot of issues facing the state.
There's a minute and a half.
Sounds good. I'll give 30 seconds. I'm Joel Young. Pardon for being late. I was coming from Sacramento. I think the first major issue for the state of California that I see that I'm running my campaign on is trying to get California back working again. Here in the state of California, we've gone from the 6th largest economy to the 8th largest economy. I think we as a community have to think about doing everything in our power to try and create jobs here in this community. I think solutions to this, first and foremost on the transportation side, are insourcing infrastructure projects in the state of California to make sure that when we are doing projects and doing construction projects and various infrastructure projects, that we're putting people to work here in our community and doing so. On the AC Transit Board, we've done a great job. We've done a great job of reallocating our contracting dollars to put people to work here in this community. So that would be first and foremost the first issue that I would think about doing. Secondly, obviously, is investing in early childhood education. That's a big issue right here in Assembly District 18, particularly Oakland and San Leandro in particular. Sorry to be the third, I'm going to stop, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Banta?
Yeah, thank you. 3 issues I think that are critical are education, public safety, and jobs in the economy. On education, one of the things, the most important thing is to increase funding. We've divested year after year in our schools, time and time again. We're selling our children and our futures in California short, and so we must increase the funding. The 2/3 majority has been an ongoing obstacle. If we can change that structurally, that would go a long way towards helping us reinvest in education. In the absence of that, I'm supportive of a bill that would allow for a 55 or 50% plus 1 threshold to be met for local parcel taxes. So if the state is not fulfilling its obligation to fund our schools at an adequate level, then our localities can vote to use their own pocketbooks to fund schools more adequately. On jobs in the economy, many of you know that we've lost redevelopment. That has really hurt our ability to turn blighted areas into economically revitalized areas. I would fight for a carve-out for former military stations like Alameda Point, Oak Knoll, Oakland Army Base, very important in this district to help revitalize those areas using tax increment financing. We can also have an economic stimulus package at the state level through bonding, the school facilities bonds or public infrastructure bonds. Finally, for public safety, I would fight to get support for programs like re-entry programs, job training, community policing, and I would be supportive of a bill that would allow for the declaration of a state of emergency in areas of the state where crime is spiking. And Oakland may well qualify for that as being the most violent city, unfortunately, in the state, and we could pull down funds to help support public safety.
I'd like to rebut any of comments you just heard from your opponent. Ms. Guillen?
Yes, thank you. So one of the things that I heard was about creating a state of emergency for our communities. Oakland, claiming that Oakland is the most violent place in the state. I have concerns about what that means. What does that look like? When you create a state of emergency, does that mean that you're giving up civil liberties, civil rights? I don't know what that looks like. And certainly there's been instances where police has abused those powers. So I'm not sure what that means, and I'd like to learn more about that.
Any other? Sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We run out of course. Too short? Thank you. Is it right question? Sorry. On the state of emergency, the state of emergency is a qualifier of need, meaning that communities need to be kept safe. How that occurs is something that will be in a balanced way that, of course, retains and protects all of the important civil liberties that are currently in place. But it will provide resources in the areas of most need. I think that's an appropriate way to govern, and I think that's sound public policy.
Mr. Young?
It's not. Now it's on. I mean, I think both of the candidates stressed some of the important issues with regards to education and public safety. Both of them have stressed the need for funding for those particular issues. But the fact of the matter is funding is going to come from people actually working. It's either going to come from sales tax, property tax revenue, or personal income tax. If people aren't working, there's going to be no funding for education. There'll be no funding for public safety. So as elected officials, as community leaders, we truly have to think about how do we get people back to work? Because if we want strong education, we want strong public safety, people have to be working and putting money into the tax revenue system for those things to happen.
Thank you. Question number 2. And Mr. Young, you will be the first one to respond to this particular question. As an elected assembly member, you will be making many hard budgetary decisions to support, reduce, or cut essential programs that are important for our district. Please share with us your philosophical belief and how these decisions will be made.
I mean, I would say, having gone through a series of budget reductions as an elected official on the AC Transit Board, I personally understand deeply how that affects your ability to deliver service and how much caring you have to have in thinking about the decisions with which you make in regards to reductions as well as inclusions. And in doing so, we turned our budgetary document into a value proposition, into a values document to say, let's figure out as an agency what our model is and what we're supposed to deliver, what services we're supposed to deliver, and then make sure we're doing everything in our power so that the dollars that we have are allocated to those deliveries of service. And that is the model with which I would take in terms of thinking about reductions, inclusions in service on the state level. I would look at what is the state supposed to be doing, what services are we supposed to be delivering, what are our core mandates, what are our core issues, and make sure that dollars are being allocated to those services.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Bonta?
Thanks. You asked more for my philosophical approach. One of the things that we've been dealing with year in and year out at the state of California with its budget is all cuts budgets. It's always cutting more, cutting to the skin, into the bone, deep into the bone marrow, and it's not an acceptable way to govern. We really need to think about the other side of budgeting, which is the revenue side. And I would be fighting hard for the two things that I mentioned earlier, a structural change to that 2/3 majority, or an ability to have the 2/3 up there to raise revenue, or an ability to devolve down to local communities the ability to tax themselves, because revenues are an important part of the equation, and we all care about our core services, our education, our social service safety net to protect the most vulnerable people in our community, our public safety, our jobs, and the economy. And we need to make sure that those areas are adequately funded. So I would invest in areas where there's revenue generation possibilities, where we can grow jobs, grow a bigger tax base, and spend more money on education that can help educate our workforce. After that, you would have to look at your core services, make sure that those are protected first, and absolutely you need to protect the people who don't have a voice, and that's the most vulnerable people in our community and the ones that really benefit from that social service safety net which currently isn't taxed.
Mr. Guillen?
Thank you. Philosophically, I think without health, you don't have anything. Without health, there's no wealth. Without health, you can't go to school. So I think a number one priority needs to be health, and that's very much tied into education. Without education, you can't get the skills you need to go get those jobs, to go out there and work or to start your own business. At the Peralta Community College, I'm proud that every year we educate over 30,000 students a year, but we've turned away so many students the last 3 years because of the budget cuts. $26 million in cuts. So we can no longer teach all the English classes that we want, all the ESL classes that we want. And in order to get California out of this economic slump, California community colleges have always been the workforce of economic development in the state. And we need to renew our commitment to education. UC is now lagging in funding, so much so that the University of California, the state of California now is the 4th largest funder of education behind the federal government and private grants and loans, or private grants. So what does that say about our priorities? That's what made California great, and I think that's the approach that I will take to solving problems up in Sacramento.
Thank you, Mr. Guillen. 30 seconds from any candidate who wish to rebut. Anyone? Okay. You want to rebut yourself? Or? All right, let's move on to the next question. All of you are elected officials. What are some lessons that you have learned that will benefit you as an effective member on the State Assembly? Let's start now with Mr. Bonta.
Thank you. As a vice mayor, as a city leader, as someone who's worked on a legislative body with 4 others from different backgrounds, different political views, I've learned the importance of collaboration, of teamwork, of listening, of being open-minded, of working together, of finding common ground. That's something that at times, more often than we'd like, is sorely missing in Sacramento with our state legislature. We have a very partisan governing body in the state legislature, where we have one party in one corner, another party in another corner, and both parties refusing to come out and meet in the middle to find solutions for the people of California. The people of California deserve more. They deserve better than that. They deserve people who will work together and find common ground. Sometimes you won't always get 100% of what you want, but it's better than getting, sometimes 80% is a lot better than getting 0%. And so we need leaders who are practical, who are thoughtful, and who are able to work together using their strength of their personal relationships with one another and their open-mindedness to find real solutions for real problems. And there are many, and they're building. And California is at a place where we really need a new set of leaders and people with that open mind and approach. And that's something that I've learned here on the City Council, and that I think I can take to become an effective leader in Sacramento.
Mr. Guillen?
Thank you very much for the question. So, unlike my opponents, I'm not a lawyer. They're lawyers. And I'm a finance guy. I'm in public finance. And so my job is to raise money and figure out how to raise money for public schools up and down California. I raised about $2.5 billion for public school kids up and down the state. And so what that means is that I've had to work in Republican counties. I've had to go to Bakersfield. I had to make relationships with the assembly members from those parts of the state. And guess what? They love their kids too, just as much as we love our kids up here. And my approach is one that I will replicate that I did on the board. When I first got elected to the Peralta board, it was very fractured. It was a lot of 4-3 votes all the time. And when I became president, I'm very happy that the fact that I got my board to work much better together. Our votes were almost always unanimous. Our meetings were about 4 hours long. I got them down to about 2.5 hours. And I think that shows that I'm an effective leader that can get people to work together. And so when I go to Sacramento, I've already worked there. I know how laws work because I've been in the building. And so there's no learning curve for me. You don't have a lot of time in Sacramento to figure out what you want to do or how to get it done. And on day one, I believe that I'm ready to get started. So, and I think those are skills that we need to have effective leadership to represent this area to get things done in Sacramento. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guillen. Mr. Young?
I mean, I would say that my experience as an elected official has definitely made me very ready to handle some of the issues in Sacramento. First and foremost, when we were on the AC Transit Board, when I was on the AC Transit Board, I was faced with a $54 million budget deficit on day one. And we were forced to reevaluate all of our services and try and retweak what we were doing so that we could continue to deliver service to the agency, deliver service to our riders. And so I think first and foremost, the ability to look at our core services and determine what is important for us to have and what is important for us not to have is a key ability to have, and I think my experience as an elected official has worked well. One of the other things I would say is in the spirit of collaboration, myself on the AC Transit Board, I've worked well with my colleagues to try and get things done for the agency, which I think will bode well in the state, in Sacramento. And finally, I think my experience as an elected official, as well as in my private practice as a lawyer, raising money for venture capital funds, working with some of the smartest people, the most brilliant people here in the state of California has influenced me to be creative, to be bold, to take initiatives on areas where people might not consider. And I think that definitely will bode well in Sacramento.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Any rebuttal from any one of the candidates, sir? 30-second rebuttal opportunity.
I am an attorney. I entered the profession because I think it can, it should be, and is an honorable profession. It's a way to help other people, help people in need. And I'm a deputy city attorney in the San Francisco City Attorney's Office, where I represent everyday people every day. Bus drivers, firefighters, police officers, people who need help. And I also bring cases on behalf of the people of the state of California when they're being hurt and to protect them. And we've fought to ensure that health insurance companies, for example, pay their fair share to trauma centers. And I was part of a historic racial profiling case that protected the civil liberties of racial minorities up and down the state of California.
Anyone else? go and collect the cards? All right. You have an opportunity, and Mr. Ganta, you will be first to respond to this question. So you were first? Okay, then I'll go back to Bill.
Okay.
For many years now, the California legislature has experienced a decline in their approval rate of likely voters. A recent study showed that only 21% of the general public has a favorable feeling for our elected officials. And there's a 66 disapproval rate. Many have lost confidence in our elected officials for solving California's ill. Your reaction to this, and what would you do in hopes of reversing this trend?
Sounds like my dad got that question, because I told my dad, why are you, I told him I'm running for the state assembly, Dad, I want to do this. He says, why? You're going to get a pay cut from your work, and you're not going to make any money. Why? And people nobody likes politicians, right? And I think that's the problem with government, is that government isn't responsive to the needs of the community. And so in my role as a trustee, I've tried to always honor public service as a valuable endeavor where you can actually serve the people and solve problems. On the Peralta Community College Board, I was able to successfully get a transit pass for our students that saves $1,000 over a year for our students, so they can get to work, go to school, and go to their work. And that system was already in place, but my job was to connect the dots. I'm also proud that I set aside $2 million to build a health center on the Layton campus. For $14 a year, our students have access to full health care on our campus. And guess what? That wasn't a new service. The county was already providing that service, but I set aside the funds to build the center and so that our students now have access, and the county is running that for us. And they contracted out with Asian Health Services as well as other clinics. But these are not new things, but they're making government work better. And so I think people need to know that government is there to work for people to help solve problems instead of getting in people's ways. And so my job as a state assembly member is to make sure that I push those issues forward that really do make a difference in people's lives.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Young, same question.
I mean, I would say, first and foremost, that people have a lot of disappointment in their elected officials at this point in time. And people are upset with government. They don't feel that we're doing everything in our power to do the right thing. I mean, I think the loss in confidence, particularly in the state legislature, has to do with the fact that for the most part over the last 4 or 5 years, the state legislature isn't tackling the real issues. They're not willing to they're not willing to be bold, they're not willing to talk real to our constituency and real to the people about what's going on in the state assembly. They're willing to pass budget gimmicks. They're willing to do things that everyone can read through the lines. So I think if we are going to restore confidence in the state legislature, we have to come together to solve issues. But more importantly, we have to begin to be able to talk very concisely about what the issues are and get people to recognize that we are facing difficult times and we have to solve them.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Dunn?
I think that the facts that were just shared about the low approval rate show that I'm not doing this for the anticipated popularity. And in fact, it's the opposite. The job is a job that isn't popular. It's a job that will involve a pay cut for many people running. But it's also a job that's too important for there to be not to be adequate and excellent leadership. So the voter confidence, I think the low voter confidence has been earned. It's justified. And the only way to get the voter confidence higher is to prove you deserve it, to earn it, through adequate leadership and strong leadership, and leadership that shows that you're fixing real problems in real people's lives. And that's what I've tried to do as a publicly elected official up to this point. I'm championing a prevailing wage ordinance to make sure that working people have wages that are sufficient in the Bay Area. We've had a strong sunshine ordinance to make sure that voters and the people have confidence in their government, that it's transparent and that it's accessible. We've passed balanced budgets year after year. And we're also doing I did some exciting things otherwise as well. When I was the director of the City of Alameda Healthcare District, we ensured that an emergency room services were kept open in the East Bay, serving people when they were in need, making sure there was appropriate emergency response. And I fought for schools time and time again. I fought for a parcel tax that generated $84 million for schools locally in the East Bay. I'm part of a statewide lawsuit which seeks to get deemed unconstitutional the state's underfunding of its schools.
How we do business. So I'd like to, at this point, start with Mr. Young on that question.
I mean, I think certainly the tax proposals to fund education are needed in light of what's going on with the education budget. I think there are some reforms in there, particularly with the schools and teachers, that I think should be looked at, should be taken into consideration. But for the most part, I believe that I don't think that we want to tax ourselves, and so I think the fact that we're having a look at this at these points in time shows the fact that we also have to be thinking about how do we grow the economy and how do we put people back to work so that we don't have to tax ourselves into the future. Because it's incredibly important, as many of you know, that people are working in order to generate tax revenue. And until we get our mind and our energy and our policy focused in behind that, then we're going to have to result to going back to taxing people in order to fund the services that have been cut because of the poor economy.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
I'm supportive of the governor's tax proposal. It's a hybrid proposal, which was created by bringing two separate proposals together and using the spirit of compromise and cooperation that I talked to before to help prepare a package that the voters can vote on. It's unfortunate that we have ballot box legislation because of that two-thirds majority, that structural problem that we discussed earlier, and so that voters have to vote on a revenue enhancement. And there's going to be a lot of revenue packages, taxes on the ballot at the same time. So it will be, it's far from clear whether it's going to pass. But we care about services in the state. We deserve good services like good schools, good public safety, a strong economy, and social services that help us all. And those cost money. And I think people will decide whether they're willing to support the tax. It's a 3%, up to a 3% tax on the very, very wealthy. So it won't affect a lot of us. And it's a 0.25% sales tax increase. So that's down from a 0.5% or a half-cent sales tax. So it's better because the sales tax can be regressive, can affect more people, so it has a lower impact on them. And it's better than the Molly Munger tax, which would spread more pain over more people. So I think it's a good package, and I support it.
Thank you, Mr. Malcolm. Mr. Guillen?
Like Mr. Bonta, I also support the governor's initiative. I came out early actually to support the millionaire's tax because I thought that was the best way to go. It wasn't regressive. I think sales taxes in the state are pretty high, and I think it taxes people everyday people who are just living paycheck to paycheck, quite frankly. And so while I'm supportive of the measure, I wish that sales tax element wasn't there. But I do think it's the best way to go at this time. And so we're going to do everything that I can to make sure that we pass it so that we can fund our education initiatives, education and public safety. If this initiative doesn't pass, we already turned away 3,000 students here at Laney, right across here in the neighborhood in Chinatown. And if this initiative doesn't pass, we're going to turn away another 3,000 to 4,000 students. And that's just unacceptable. So we cannot let that pass. We cannot let it fail. I'm not a big fan of budget or balloting by ballots because I think it really people don't have long-term memories. That's how we got Prop 13 in place. That really started the divestment of education and public services for our infrastructure. I don't know if you guys drove here tonight, but our roads are a mess. How many potholes do you have to run into all the time? And that's not only here in Oakland, that's all in our community. So what we need to do is look at long-term solutions to try to reinvest in our California's infrastructure that's crumbled.
Person for the 18th district. The year is 2014. You just completed your first term. What would you like your legacy to be? And how realistic and achievable is this? And I think I need to start with Mr. Guillen, is that correct? Okay, I lost track.
Thank you. So, a legacy after 2 years. What do I hope to accomplish in my first term? I think some of the things that I touched on earlier in the priority areas are going to be critical. I'd like to, one, if I were elected, I would like to take a leadership role, chair one of the important committees, and have my voice in the room when the Democratic Party is setting its agenda for how it's going for its legislative package for the next 2 years. I think it's very important, and key among those priorities will be funding education, focusing on K-12, and certainly also community colleges and state universities and UCs, making sure that our jobs and our economy are really focused on, and also public safety. So some of the things I touched on earlier, I hope that those would be part of my legacy, that we would have an exemption for our former military stations, that we would have tax increment financing to help rebuild Oakland Army Base and Alameda Point. Also, that we would have adequate resources for public safety, and that we would have increased funding for our schools, and also a formula that's fair in the implementation of funding to the different school districts and the average daily attendance formula. So, one thing that may happen in June is that there's a term limits proposal that would allow for term limits to be stretched to 12 years. I support that. I think it allows more time for legislators to dig in, work together, work on problems, and find those solutions for California. Thank you.
Mr. Guillen?
Thank you for the question. I think in the first year, one of the things that I want to see is to make sure that middle-class Californians actually have the opportunity to afford the University of California. Right now, even at the Cal State system, Cal State is no longer accepting students this semester, the spring semester. If you're starting out or if you need to get new tools, retraining, you are no longer, you can't even enroll at the university because they're turning away students. So in the first 2 years, I want to go after big oil companies like Chevron to make sure that they pay an oil severance tax. If we go after Chevron, if these initiatives don't pass, and big oil companies, we could easily fund another $1 billion into education to fund our public schools, our public universities. California is the only state that does not have an oil severance tax. Sarah Palin's Alaska has an oil severance tax. Texas has a severance tax, so does the state of Louisiana. And there's no reason why we should be left behind when it comes to that particular issue. So I'm going to push for that very hard and make sure that we fund education. Also want to make sure that we increase the enrollment actually of our community colleges and go back to a funding formula where we don't deny access, but the actually community colleges are open to everyone. Right now they're not, and we're turning away people. So those are the two big issues that I want to work on.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Young?
You know, I would say, I'm not that concerned about my legacy. The historians determine that. I would just say after 2 years, I hope that more people are working here in the state of California. I hope that the employment rate is down. I hope that we've done something over the last 2 years to make the state more amenable, particularly to small businesses, which we have a lot here in Oakland. And I hope that I played a part in coming up with common sense legislation that supports job creation and that supports the state in being a friendlier environment for small businesses.
Thank you. The thing that I think would be very important to address in the first 2 years of the next legislators or next assembly person's term is making sure that either there is that there is a specific strategy to address the revenue problem that we have in the state of California. Either a proposal to put on the ballot, a proposed constitutional amendment to change the 2/3 majority to 55% or 50% plus one, or an additional strategy, or maybe even a parallel strategy to devolve that power, that revenue generation power to the localities and allow them to do it at a lower threshold of 2/3, 55%, maybe 50% plus one. I think that's critical to structural success and health of California.
Qualify. Obviously, we're going to have to pick one of you to represent us. What makes you better than the person next to you? Not getting personal. We'll start with, let's see, Mr. Young, I believe you're next. You lost count.
So I think at the end of the day, what uniquely qualifies me is that I'm the only candidate that's running who's balanced 6 budgets in a row and who has finance experience. I want to actually work on the Tax and Revenue Committee up in Sacramento. I graduated from the University of California. I have a master's degree in public policy from UC Berkeley. And through that training that I got, it really made me want to delve into the details of tax policy. I think that's what I bring to the table, and I already can hit the run brownie, the run, you know what I'm saying? Yes, that. On day one. And so I think that distinguishes, but more than anything, I think is my passion for public service. As I mentioned earlier, I'm the first in my family to graduate from college, and unfortunately that dream is diminishing. I benefited from public services. I went to the health clinic when we didn't have insurance. I went to get government cheese growing up because sometimes my family couldn't make ends meet. I'm a product of the system, and I was fortunate to get a degree at UC Berkeley that stopped the cycle of poverty in my life. So I want to make sure that other people have that opportunity. And at the end of the day, if I can change policies so that other people have that same opportunity and they don't have to stay in the cycle of poverty, then I would feel successful and we've done something.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
I would say first and foremost, what makes me uniquely qualified to represent you is the fact that I'm from this community. I've lived in Oakland since 1996. I have the longest standing living. I've been living here the longest out of any of the candidates in the race. I grew up here playing baseball right down at Greenman Field in the heart of Oakland. I'm the only candidate who's represented this entire community for upwards of 3 years, and I have a strong knowledge base in all the different areas within this community, and I'm the only candidate that truly is running on a jobs platform, which is the #1 issue for this state. We're in an economic crisis. We have to be putting people back to work. As an elected official, I've done things to do that, and I'm the only candidate that can legitimately say that.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Fountain?
Thank you. Thank you. I think some of the things that make me unique are one, I'm the only candidate up here who served on the city council as the vice mayor of a East Bay city, addressed a whole range of policy issues, the broadest range of policy issues of any of the candidates, from public safety to economic development to job creation to planning and zoning to parks and recreation, everything that cities do, to fixing potholes to streets and roads to public infrastructure, all of which will be critical at the state level as well. I've balanced budgets regularly under very difficult conditions. Another thing that I think that makes me unique is I'm the only candidate with a family. I have 3 school-age kids, Reina and Liliana and Andres. I'm deeply invested in the future of this state, the quality of public schools, the provision of health care, and so that makes me unique as well. And I think that I'm the candidate up here who has the broadest coalition of support from various groups, from organized labor to the business community, to grassroots, community leaders and activists. So I think those are the 3 areas that make me unique. Thank you.
I don't know if it's a question of being fair, it's a question of, if that's true, all Californians are paying for pensions for public sector employees, here in the state of California. Whether or not those should continue The better question is whether or not whether or not it's fair, but whether or not those practices should continue into the future. And I think we as a state of California, in light of the budgetary situation with which we find ourselves, are most likely going to have to ask public sector employees to pay more for their pensions in the future if they don't get the 7.7% return that most portfolios are expected to make. That's just the reality with which we find ourselves.
I'm a public employee. I'm earning my pension, working towards a pension. My parents were both state workers, SEIU 1,000 workers. They worked for the state of California for over 50 years combined. They work for their pensions. Pensions that were promised need to be given. Those are contractual promises and that were made. And I think that if there's going to be changes to pensions, if there's going to be reform, it needs to be done in the good faith bargaining process. That's the way it works. That's the way it should work. I'm a deep believer in the good faith bargaining process and sitting down at the table and working across the table with your partner to find solutions. So I think that's a question that will be dealt with at the various bargaining tables of the public employees. And one of the things I don't agree with is that a top-down imposed one-size-fits-all pension reform. I think it needs to be done through the good faith bargaining process at tables across the state and in localities.
Thank you. Mr. Guillen?
Thank you for the question. I think there are some abuses out there. When you see some superintendents and other high-end public officials who sort of cram all their vacation time at the end and sort of boost their package, I think there's some pension spiking issues that need to be reformed. However, I don't think we should throw out the whole system because the average pension for California and state employees is only about $2,000. Only $2,000. And who can live on a retirement on $2,000? That's very difficult to do. More importantly, we do have to make the pie bigger. But when you look at the state budget, pensions only come out to about 2% of the state budget, 2 to 3%. And so I would be looking at cost savings in other areas instead of attacking working people. Working people, like many of our families, signed up for a bargain and oftentimes said they're going to get a lower salary for security and health benefits and retirement. And so I'm very much against taking out the system wholesale as well.
In our county. And I think this time we started with you, Mr. Thomas.
Short answer is yes. I supported high-speed rail when it was on the ballot. I continue to support it. I think that one of the things that California can do and should do is lead, be bold, do big, innovative things and projects. There will be a lot of job creation. I do worry about the increasing expenditures of the high-speed rail project. There was a price tag that was originally placed on it, and that's gone up and up. So hopefully those costs can be contained and be reasonable, but I do support high-speed rail.
I was heartened to see that the revised High-Speed Rail Authority has revised their projections on the cost of the high-speed rail. I think it's an investment that we need for the state of California. How great would it be to catch a train from the East Bay to Los Angeles to go visit family and friends? That would only increase commerce. There's so many development opportunities when you do get a high-speed train up and down California. So I'm very much in support of high-speed rail in the state. I am a little concerned about the final sort of project that they've come up with, because the latest iteration that I've seen is actually different than what the voters approved. So I want to make sure that whatever the voters approve is actually consistent with the plan that gets laid out at the end of the day.
Thank you. Mr. Young?
I would say I'm supportive of high-speed rail in concept. One of the big problems with high-speed rail is, it'll create a lot of jobs in the short term in terms of building it, but the question is going to be, how is it going to fund itself? Projections have been from the High-Speed Rail Authority that the fare box revenue will cover the operational cost for the high-speed rail system, But in my experience on the transit board, I find that highly unlikely that fares will cover the true costs of what it will take in order to run a high-speed rail authority. So in that situation, then what is that going to mean? It's going to be more money from the state is going to be taken from your local transit operators to fund high-speed rail. So fantastic. You can go, you can get from Bakersfield to the Bay Area in 1 hour, but you can't take a bus from one end of Oakland to the other end of Oakland. So I think that's something that very much concerns me and something that we have to think about in terms of whether or not we're going to have high-speed rail in this state.
This is kind of a fun question. Let me ask this, kind of a little lively question. Who is the person or so role model that you would like join you if you were stranded in a desolate island, and why? So let's, who's next? I'm trying to think of that first question. We're sort of, okay. Let's start with Mr. Young. You laughed the hardest.
If I was stranded on an island by myself, who would I want to join me? I'd want my girlfriend, Kisa Ocampo, to join me.
Very good. Mr. Ian? Oh, Mr. Dunn.
All right, I hope I don't date myself with this reference, but I think it demonstrates about practical solutions. So there's a TV character named MacGyver. He is able to find solutions under the worst of circumstances and in the most desperate situations. So it shows that I'm practical, I'm about solutions, and so I want MacGyver with me to help make sure I could live a long time until we got rescued from the island. And no offense to my wife.
I certainly hope there would be a search boat that comes out, because I don't want to be stranded on an island. But if I were a role model, somebody that I'd like to learn from is someone like FDR. Roosevelt is a great hero of mine, a personal hero. He was a great president. He understood the importance of getting California and our country working again. They did the most massive public works project in the history of our country that helped rebuild our schools, our roads, our infrastructure, all the common goods. And today, even in the city, there's still a lot of buildings standing that were built under the WPA Act. So I would like to sit down with him and get his wisdom as how he was able to accomplish those things to help our country work again in a very bad depression.
Thank you. Any rebuttal?
I think the question talked about a role model, someone to learn from. I think the opportunity to spend some real quality time with Cesar Chavez or Philip Vera Cruz, I think would be an amazing opportunity. Both leaders of the United Farm Workers Movement at a time where lines were drawn and battling were fought. And so I think that spirit would really help the encouragement to continue to fight for social justice and economic justice and racial justice, and to hear about how that fight was waged and how it was successful up to a very exciting point, but how it needs to continue would be very important.
From a pot of money as police, fire, and other social services. What would you cut, and specifically, what would you keep? So, again, it's kind of two questions. What would you cut, what would you keep? Again, we're talking about schools, police, fire, and other social services. And I believe we're right to you. Mr. Gill?
Thank you for the question. One thing that I would look at is I'd like to understand what's not working in state government. For example, there might be some duplicative services that the state does that other agencies do. For example, here in the East Bay, we're very blessed to have a lot of biotech firms. And the complaint that I always hear from a lot of these industries who are trying to build the new pharmaceuticals to solve a lot of our problems is that, the state of California comes in and stops our production because they want to do inspections. I don't know that the inspections that the state of California does is any different than the Food and Drug Administration, which is a higher level inspection. And those are really the rules that we have to adhere to. So that's an example of duplicative services that we ought to really rethink. When I get to the legislature, I think one of the things that I want to do is actually make sure that we spend time as a legislature looking at programs that no longer work, that are antiquated, and trying to figure out how to modernize our system. And I don't think the legislature does a lot of that. They're not as reflective as they ought to be. So I think serving on the audit committee would be one of the functions that I would like to serve on.
Mr. Young?
I mean, I would say first and foremost, before we take a look at cutting services, we have to look at the various tax credits and exemptions that we're giving away and reevaluate whether or not they're meeting the public policy goals for which we gave them in the first place. So that would be the first area with which I would look at before touching any of the vital social services. In terms of the state budget, where I would look to want to cut first is obviously from the Department of Corrections, and seeing where we can reduce that budget in order to reallocate to some other vital social services like education, like infrastructure. I mean, what's the study and the data are clear that for every $3 you invest in early child education, every dollar you invest in early child education, you save $3 from the Department of Education, from the Department of Corrections. So that's something that I would want to take a look at in terms of reallocating dollars from the Department of Corrections to education, and seeing whether or not some of these studies are correct in their analysis.
Thank you. Mr. Bond.
Thank you. I think that the question that's posed is a question that we've come to, unfortunately, get used to. It's the question that's been posed time and time again in Sacramento, but I don't accept the underlying presumption that you always have to cut and that it's a zero-sum game for the most important services in our community. I think we first need to look at revenue enhancements, and we talked about that already through tax measures, as well as getting rid of that two-thirds structural revenue enhancement challenge, or giving the opportunity to localities to tax themselves. Also, we always have to look at increased efficiencies, avoiding redundancies, trying to take waste out of the system so that you're not, so the very last thing you do is get rid of the street level service that benefits the average Californian. If cuts need to be made, I would look at potential bloated management and waste at the very highest levels away from the direct services. That's what we did when I was the director of the City of Alameda Healthcare District. We took a 5% cut for all of our top level management or executive team to help save money. I think that's worth looking at again. But among the services that you mentioned, those are our core services. Education can't afford further cuts. Our social services, you know, in the governor's most recent budget proposal, CalWorks, child care, in-home support services are all getting cut. You know, health and human services are getting slaughtered in the state, and we can't afford it. For the police and fire, that area has typically been an area for localities to lie. But I think the state's role would be to backfill in areas where it's really absolutely critical that additional funding be given.
A couple more cards, I'll pick one. I'll pick this one because the person who wrote this showed a lot of, perhaps really want this answer. How do you plan to address California's high unemployment rate among ethnic minorities? And this time we start with Cody. Yeah.
Well, I would say I would take the approach that we took on the AC Transit. First and foremost, we reformed all of our procurement policies at the agency under my leadership to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to reallocate contracting dollars to our local community, in particular for minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. And because of the changes that were made, we're in the process of reallocating upwards of hundreds of millions of dollars to our local community over the next 10 years. We just, three weeks ago, we just gave a huge bus contract to a company right down here in Hayward that is putting real people from this community, from a whole host of different ethnic minority backgrounds, to work right here in this community. I think the state of California can do better. There are various transportation infrastructure projects that have happened right here in our backyard where we could have put people from this community to work, but we failed to do so. This is why I'm running for the state of California, because I think we as elected officials have to do everything in our power to support jobs here in this community. And that's why I'm running. If you believe that that's an important issue, support me.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Johnson?
I think there's a couple ways a number of ways where we can help increase job opportunities for ethnic minorities in California. One is to create a regulatory regime and business environment that supports mom and pop shops and small businesses. A lot of mom and pop shops and small businesses are minority owned, create jobs for ethnic minorities in our state, and so creating a regulatory regime which is certain and predictable and practical would really help in that regard to pop up and support and stimulate and maintain mom and pop shops. Another one is I think that the state, because of its size and its ability, can really take a role in putting together an economic stimulus package that put people back to work now and do so while reinvesting in our state in ways that are critical. For example, a school facilities bond will help put people back to work while investing in our deteriorating school infrastructure. Another one would be a public infrastructure bond, helping rebuild our roads and tunnels and bridges, and also putting people back to work. A lot of the building trades provide jobs to ethnic minorities in our community. But then taking one step back, we need to make sure that all of the ethnic minorities in California are prepared to succeed in a competitive job market. And the achievement gap has been extremely difficult in education for ethnic minorities, and allocating resources in those schools, in those areas, in those neighborhoods that really need it most to make sure that every child gets an excellent education in California, I think is critical.
Mr. Guillen.
Thank you. Has anybody ever tried to do business with the state of California? It's a nightmare. It really is a nightmare. The regulations are this high. You have to follow all this paperwork, all this craziness, and to even try to get on the list to try to do business with the state. So that's a good place to start. We need to figure out what the barriers are to actually having local businesses or even mid-sized businesses participating and getting work from the state of California. One of the things that I would like to see happen, and I think this will keep a lot of our money in the state of California, is instead of borrowing from big Wall Street banks, we have the 8th largest economy here in the state. What if we created a Bank of California that invested back in California in local businesses, into local communities, into your shops, into your business, local business here? So when you go out and borrow money, guess what? Instead of paying those rich fat cats on Wall Street, that money gets reinvested here into our community. And that's money that gets recycled. And we can make sure that it's actually distributed in a way that benefits our local communities. Because we own the Bank of California, we would have that mandate to make sure that money gets reinvested in our local communities.
Thank you. Any rebuttal from any of the candidates? All right, now it's time for the closing remarks. And if you can set your time for 2 minutes. Okay, got it? All right, we'll start with you, Mr. Guillen. Closing remarks.
I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here. You stuck it out, so a round of applause for you all. Congratulations. I also just wanted to acknowledge my campaign manager, Winnie Liu, who is here. Winnie, if you could stand up. Thank you for all your work. I am very proud of having a very diverse group of endorsements. I'm the only candidate who's been endorsed by people like Betty Yee, David Kakishiba, Gary Yee, school board member. I'm the only candidate who's been endorsed by the Sierra Club, the California Nurses Association, as well as the California Federation of Teachers. I think I have a broad coalition of support across the spectrum because I have a track record of getting things done. The thing that I hate the most is politicians who just talk, talk, talk. I hate that. I'm a man of action, and if you elect me to Sacramento, I will work for you every single day. We have some really excellent candidates here today that are running for office, but right now we need somebody with experience who can roll up their sleeves and get down to business.
I would say thank you for having us here. I truly am running because I'm focused on bringing jobs here to this community. Dating back to 2008, this community has been ravaged by the economic crisis. We have high unemployment here. We also have high unemployment in the state of California. I believe that we as elected officials, community leaders, business leaders, and labor leaders have to come together on the issue of putting people back to work. As an elected official on the AC Transit Board, I have done just that, reallocating contracting dollars to put people in this community to work. If you believe in that, give me your vote to go to Sacramento, because I'm going to be focused in on implementing policy to get this state working again, to make sure that people are putting food on the table and paying property taxes and paying rent and supporting everything that's going on in this community.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Danto?
I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. It was exciting for me to have this opportunity to talk to all of you. I did want to recognize my mother, Cynthia Bonta, who is a founding member of APAPA and is here tonight. She worked with CCE in Sacramento to help provide all the great resources that APAPA provides to the Asian American community. And I've done my best to follow in her footsteps. It's been difficult, but I was the president of the Alameda County Democratic API Caucus, and proud to have represented APIs who are looking to take leadership positions in public office. I would also be the first Filipino-American state legislator in the history of California. Never before has there been a Filipino-American assembly member, never before has there been a Filipino-American state senator. And Filipino-Americans are the second largest Asian American community in the state of California and the fastest growing. The legislature is that body that's supposed to represent the full diversity of its state. So there's an exciting opportunity here for the API community. I was proud to serve with Filipino Advocates for Justice on their board, the Manila-Town Heritage Foundation, and honored to have the API Legislative Caucus's endorsement in this race. And some of the great leaders in Sacramento, like Fiona Ma, and some locally as well, like Wilma Chan, Alameda County Supervisor. So I think what I have to offer is very strong social justice roots, which I referred to earlier from my parents' work with United Farm Workers. I grew up going to demonstrations and protests and rallies, fighting for justice and asking for progress. And that battle continues and needs to continue in Sacramento. I hope to bring a voice in the room of the halls of Sacramento to continue that fight. And I think that I offer the broadest array of policy experience to this very important seat. So I want to thank you all for being here, and I would be honored to have your support. Thank you.